does become increasingly difficult to see though, Sandy. This is what happens when you get old. We switched it off and switched it back on again.
Yeah.
We smacked it with a hammer.
Yeah.
And we squirted it with WD-40.
Yeah.
Perfect. See you later.
See you later.
Great news. Got something to play about with for the weekend. This is Aaron. Aaron has joined us. When did you join us, Aaron?
Monday last week.
He's nervous about the
3rd of March.
3rd of March.
Yeah.
So he's been here a week and he's been done a pretty much everything. We've had him on a sprayer and he's now drilling mustard. Unfortunately, we got a bit of rain last night and it killed the mustard drilling, but we're just going to have a look out here at this field, see if we can get going now. Oh my God, Aaron. Have you seen the size of these roots?
Yeah, that's what Housefield was like
Oh, really?
last night as well. Yeah,
Oh, dear.
that's why I left the headlands. I didn't want to go bouncing over them.
Oh, dear. You see, this land's so dry, I reckon it'll have taken it right now. Oh, it's a bit damp just there, isn't it? But that's always going to be damp. And how was it going last night?
Housefield was a bit sticky, but
I know, but the house field is a bit sticky.
yeah,
The house
I don't
field's
really know.
sticky in a drought.
yeah, I don't know the fields yet, do
No.
I?
You'll find Housefield is one of the wettest on this block,
Yeah,
but it's all quite choice.
yeah,
Do you think it's worth a try?
yeah. Come down and give it a go.
Right, that means you're going to have to show me how to work the Bowser.
I can give you some lessons on that, Michael.
We've got a posh new Bowser that turned up the other day and I haven't dared use it yet because I didn't dare before James got back. But anyway, we've commissioned it now because we got desperate.
First out in this morning.
Aaron took it out for the first little jaunt and he's now going to show me how to work it so I can do this evening while he goes and do a bit of drilling. So let's go and have a look at that. This is what James has bought to pacify me because I'm telling him we can't manage with 2 sprayers. But we're going to increase the output of the 2 sprayers with this new tanker he's bought. So 16,000 litres, obviously the 2 main sprayers carry 8,000 each. So do the maths. Right, can you show me how to work it?
I can show you.
Right.
Right, so this is your input one,
Yeah.
hopefully.
I suppose I'll stand out the way so Tom can see. Cool, blimey boy. Right. So we stand here patiently. How long did it take you to fill it this morning?
Not very long.
What, in hours or minutes?
No,
Or seconds?
no, not seconds.
Oh.
I'll probably say a good 20 minutes.
Oh, that's not so bad.
Right, lessons for the tractor now then.
That's right, it's not as big as that. I think even I can manage that. They do get technical though, in all seriousness, tractors are far too technical for people like me that don't get on them very often.
Yeah,
Fortunately we haven't advanced that quickly at home, so the ones I've got still have an actual gear stick.
what's wrong with them?
But anyway,
The bit you need is quite simple really.
Yeah, as long as I can go forward
As long as
and
that,
backwards.
long as that arrow's flashing forwards or backwards,
Yeah.
whichever way you want to go, then just use the throttle.
Right. So does this tractor play any part in filling the thingy?
No,
Can I switch it off then?
if you want, yeah.
I have a bee in my bonnet about tractor hours. Tractors are valued on hours nowadays.
Yeah,
And I am amazed that how, on any farm, not just this one, but I'm amazed how often a tractor sits there idling for hours, adding hours to the thing that it's not actually working.
yeah.
Am I
No.
just an old man?
No, it's about right.
I'll switch it off then.
But if you're going to do that,
Oh,
when you turn it back on,
yeah,
make sure you tick the tick.
right. Sandy, what have you done to the sprayer this time?
I haven't done anything.
The
The fast fill valve has stopped working. We've got
Can't you slow fill?
no,
Why not?
because it's pulling itself right up to main on half bar,
Oh no, that's
which is not good for the sprayer.
No.
So Simon's on his way out. I've just unplugged it all and replugged it. I've spoke to David at Mans and we've gone through it all.
Have we got an idea of what's up with it?
Yeah, it's this valve here. It's not opening and closing.
Have you hit it with a hammer yet?
I've tapped it,
Uh-huh.
plugged it back in, unplugged it, made sure all the connections are clean. but she's not moving at all.
It's not plugged in.
No, it was plugged in before. I'm not that stupid, Michael. Simon's coming. I'm just going to test that there is actually power coming into this plug.
Right. And if there is,
then this is gone. So it's just unscrew it at the back, off, new one on.
Right. That's just a solenoid.
Yeah.
How long's Simon going to be?
He shouldn't be too long. He should be here imminently.
Oh, my feeling on the 48 metre sprayers, I'm very excited about the 48 metre sprayers. I just don't think there are enough of them. You're not going to increase the output of a sprayer. You're not going to double the output of a sprayer by putting a 48 metre boom on it. So I think we'll struggle. I'm hoping that we might end up having a third.
Yeah, but we got 3 good spray. We've got 5 good sprayer drivers now, Michael.
Well, they can't drive. It doesn't matter how good you are. You can't make them go in the wind, can you?
No, that is very true.
Or when it's too wet.
That is true.
They all do as much as each other when they're parked in the yard.
Yeah, that is very true.
It does become increasingly difficult to see, though, Sandy. This is what happens when you get old.
Make sure he doesn't turn his beacons on, or else that's an extra 10 quid.
He has done.
Has
He's
he?
done it already.
Has he?
Yes, you never know what might hit you when you're parked on a concrete pad.
Here we go.
It's the 4th emergency service.
You fucking run him over.
We'll run over the cameraman, we don't mind that. It's the 4th emergency service.
Finger slipped on the beacon.
I knew he was going to do that.
That's what he said.
Don't accept cash.
I told you I'd have a job.
You're doing the important job, Michael.
Yeah.
Holding the piece of kit.
Right, look, you all need a tool holder.
I'm hoping it's just this. I'm hoping the valve, the solenoid valve. I'm hoping it's just a solenoid valve. Wiring, then tracing backwards.
Our suspicions have been confirmed. Sandy needs rewiring. You just needed me here.
He's away.
Right?
He's away. That's it. Fill it. Perfect.
Can we go?
Yeah, you can go.
I'm going to have to, I've forgotten I've got a blood test. I've got to go. So Sandy,
Yeah, it's not working.
we worked this breakdown out, haven't we?
Yeah,
We went through the 3 stages, didn't we?
yeah,
We switched it off and switched it back on again.
Yeah,
We
which I
smacked it with a hammer.
yeah,
And we squirted it with WD-40.
yeah.
Perfect. See you later.
See you later.
Well, it looks lovely, doesn't it? This has all been mould and worked nicely, left over the winter. There's a little bit of raw coming up. I'm not going to roll it. James is going to have a go potty, but I think it's just too wet underneath the roll at the moment. I think we'll let them come up and then roll them once they're up. I think we'd do more harm than good if we rolled them at the moment. So there's 2 benefits to rolling that spring to mind. Firstly, it conserves moisture. So if this dries out, then it'll struggle to chit. But the peas are well into moisture. I'm not worried about that. They're going down nicely. The drill puts it down a bit. But probably the more important thing is that peas will often go really flat. So at harvest, so when it comes to combining, you need a really good hard surface to be able to combine them nicely. Otherwise, you end up with a combine full of soil, which obviously doesn't go very nicely. Preems, well, the stuff we've already drilled, they're already on, so we're going sort of the next day. I just don't think the only thing about the preems, if there's any chance of rolling, it wants rolling first. But I really just don't want to touch this with rolls. So we'll finish drilling peas altogether this afternoon. So we'll get Chris in here and get it sealed or preemmed and then call that it until they're up, and then we'll reassess it. Well, I'd be delighted with 6 tonnes a hectare. I think last year we did just over 5 tonnes, if I remember rightly, around the 5 tonnes, which is quite good for peas. So that's where I'm aiming for. Peas are they're a bit fickle. One year you can have a really brilliant year, and another year they could be a complete disaster. They never seem to be that consistent. A lot depends on the weather, so we'll have to see where we get with it. Yeah, peas. Yeah, these are a break crop. So this was barley last year, so we're peas this year, which is a non-cereal crop, obviously, and then we'll come back to first wheat next year. So these will be right. So this is a wheeling. Glyn's concerned because it was quite fluffy. He was struggling to bury the seed in the wheelings. Well, this is a wheeling that isn't actually a tramline, so I'm just going to check it. But they're well in. Actually, for this reason, I'd prefer to roll it, but it's just too moist. It's just like there's a clod there. Admittedly, in 2 days' time, I won't be able to do this, but it literally is like putty. If we roll that, everything underneath it's just going to go down quite hard. Peas do not like compaction of any description. So I think these are all right though. The peas are covered. It's just a bit loose above them, but they are covered, and they're covered to a reasonable depth as well. So I'm not worried. They'll be all right. Soil health, well, yes, that's a big topic, that is. But I'm happy with this. It's been mould. So the drainage will be good. It's friable. Look, it's lovely and friable. The top had dried out really nicely. It's just quite wet underneath, but it's not too wet. It's perfectly okay. In an ideal world, it would be slightly dry, but it's fine. Let's get them in the ground, get them growing. There's some cold weather. We're having close to frost at night at the moment, but next week it looks a whole lot different, talking about 15 degrees during the day, cooler at night, but not frosty. So let's get them in the ground and get them growing. That's what I say. So this field's been drilled 2 days now, and we just keep getting awkward sprinkly showers on that, which don't do any good at all, but they're enough to probably stop us rolling. If we look at this seed bed, it's lovely and friable. We've been really delicate with it, putting the peas in with a bloody great 1167 and 12 metre drill, but nevertheless we've been delicate with it, and it's a lovely friable seed bed. But if you pick a handful up that hasn't got straw in it, and it just goes a little bit puttified, which is why I don't want to roll it. And I don't think that's going to get any better before it starts, excuse my phone yet again, before they chit. So there again, I just don't think we dare roll it. I think we'll leave it and roll them if we still deem it necessary. If we haven't had a good shower to put it down, then we'll roll it when the peas are up. Okay, so here we have the Serto drill. We didn't see much of this in the autumn because we've got 2 of these. We didn't see much of them in the autumn because it was so blooming wet and it wasn't putting the seed in well enough. And then, of course, those front wheels on the drill, they would pick up mud and then it would lift the drill out of the ground. So in the end, we had to part them up, use time drills. But in the right conditions, this is an absolutely superb drill. There's no cultivation on it, barring the eradicator tines. There's no cultivation at all. But there's quite a lot of pressure on those coulters, and it's just nice, just slotting the seed in nicely, and then a press wheel behind to press it back down. And it's as I say, in the right conditions, when you've got a nice level seed bed, and especially in the autumn when you've done a nice cultivation job, they are really good and quite quick as well. You can really get on with them. So we're drilling mustard. Mustard seed is about the size of oilseed rapeseed, and consequently we don't drill that as deep because there isn't the reserves in the seed to get it out of the ground from, for instance, peas, where we're drilling those 3 inches deep. They're a lot bigger seed. There's more reserve in the pea for it to live off while it gets out of the ground and establishes a root. So the mustard would be in about 1 inch, which means that this drill is pretty good for that. It's very precise where it puts the seed, whereas the tine drill is a bit rifty and a bit agricultural, for want of a better word. This is really quite heavy land. In fact, it's some of the heaviest land we've got. Not ideally suited for spring drilling, but of course a lot of the break crops now that we're growing are spring crops. The secret to drilling, being able to drill heavy land, is not to work it too fine in the autumn. So you'll see this is actually it settled a lot under the rain, but we left it really quite rough, get the air into it so that it dries out quicker in the spring. Now, in an ideal world, I would have liked to have pulled a tine across this or something just to level it and tickle it over, but actually it's I think would have done more harm than good. The less you can paddle about on heavy land like this in the spring, the better. So we're just tickling over with a drill. So the surface probably isn't quite what most people would want, but actually it'll be fine. The mustard, this drill's very good, even on unlevel soil, of putting the seed in just where you want it. So the mustard should grow. And we will have done less paddling as a result, so it should grow better. So there is an art to growing spring crops on heavier land. Traditionally, you'd have reserved spring crops for lighter, easier working land that dried out quicker in the spring. We sprayed this field in the autumn, in December. It was getting a little bit late and cold, but we gave it a fair dose of Roundup. Because it was greening up and it was full of volunteer cereals and ryegrass. This is a really bad field for ryegrass, and the cereals, or the volunteer cereals, all died really well. Really pleased with the kill. The ryegrass stayed as green as grass, which made me very nervous because there's all sorts of talk about ryegrass resistant to glyphosate. So I got a bit of a panic on thinking that we'd got resistant ryegrass. However, I waited till a really good sunny day a week ago when it was really warm and gave this a good dollop of glyphosate, oversprayed it. I didn't go over the recommended rate, but I did give it full rate with a wetter. And yeah, I keep coming over here to see if it's going off. Thank God it does seem to be going off. It looks plenty green enough at the moment, but actually it doesn't look as green as it did yesterday. And it's got a yellow tinge to it. And actually, if you look down the hedge side to stuff that hasn't been sprayed, you can see, well, you can't see it from there, Tom, but I saw it as we walked in. That is very green. So I'm pretty confident this is going off, but it is just a lesson in glyphosate isn't perfect if it's used in the wrong conditions, and it does need a good growing conditions. It does need a bit of warmth, and it does need plenty of drying time. Yeah, no, these plates are, we joke, but in all seriousness, we did have a nasty the other day where we dropped one of these off on a track, on blocks, I hasten to add, and overnight it sank and it kept going until the fifth wheel was on the floor. Yeah. So, so we've brought these plates down, we stand them on these plates now, and they well, so far, so good.
They should be fine.
Yeah, it should be all right, yeah. And if they're not, I won't be here anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Then don't ring me either.
Right, good morning. It is Thursday the 13th of March, and we continue with drilling peas and drilling mustard and applying fertiliser and putting residual herbicides on, so everybody's busy on the farm. But for the next half an hour or so, I've got a friend and colleague here who's joined me, Tom Land.
Morning, Michael.
Tom Land, let me introduce you. Tom is the head of fertiliser at Agrii, but he's been with Agrii since 1956. And what I would say about Tom is he's an absolute expert on crop nutrition. And whilst I see my role within Agrii as an agronomist, as a GP, if you like, so I cover everything on farms. But the good thing about Agrii is we do have some mad scientists like Tom, specialists in their fields, that are all working behind me. And I work quite closely with Tom on quite a few farms, but because he is so great at the science behind the nutrition. So I've asked him to come along today to discuss this field of nightmares, as I've christened it, this field of dreams, as James likes to call it. So Tom, what we're trying to achieve here is James has set me this task that he told me the other day, like nothing like setting the crop up as you would. He would like to make 12 tons a hectare out of this crop.
Okay.
It was drilled in early November.
Right.
It's skyfall.
Yeah.
It's not one of the nicest fields on the farm. So he's really made life easy for me. However, that's the challenge.
Okay.
He's not given me a budget. He doesn't mind what I spend. He just wants to see if we can achieve 12 tonne off it. Now, I would have chosen a different field.
Yeah.
The reason we've chosen this field is that we've actually walked quite a long way down this field.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
That's the yard. The shed on the right. That's the field. That's the shed of dreams.
Okay, and this is the field of dreams. Okay, right.
Yeah. So we picked it very scientifically for its geographic location and its proximity to the yard, ready for the open day.
Okay. And was the field of dreams set when the drill went into the field, or was the field of dreams set a couple of weeks ago or something like that?
The field of dreams was set as we drove through the yard about a week ago. And
Right,
James had
okay.
one of these light bulb moments that he does regularly, and he just made this decision.
Brilliant, brilliant.
So yes, that's actually a very good point. Let's just explain, because you're a lot better at explaining these things than I am, because you don't look at a camera and then forget what you're saying. Just explain to me what we would be thinking about had we been set this challenge in August, for instance.
Yeah, I suppose it gives you a bit of a longer run up to set the plan for the field of dreams, i.e. making sure that, you do all of this anyway, probably, is making sure that the soil's in good structure, the crop is going to, the seed is going to go into, a well consolidated seed bed, hopefully the optimum time of year with the optimum amount of moisture in the seed bed, and everything's going to be great, and we're going to get a good plant population and a base we can work with and start building upon. Also, in the run up to that point as well, is making sure that we've not omitted any key fertilisers that help with the establishment of that crop, so making sure there's adequate phosphorus supply in the soil for the plant to build a root system, because that root system is really important when the crop starts to grow through massive stages of growth, i.e. the crop getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and its demand for water gets greater and greater and greater, because if we've got a limited root system and we haven't factored that in at the start, then I'm not making excuses. I'm trying to kind of say we've got to think about these things. But if this is the set of cards we've got a crop here we can work with. Now it's a case of manipulating what we can do, either with what's in the soil or what the plant's going to be able to extract from the soil. So yeah, ideally, field of dreams, you'd have maybe given it a nice lashing of some sort of organic manure, so there was lots of free nutrients there for the plant to take up. But if we've got a heavy clay soil and we've got a crop in the ground, we've just got to manage what we've got and deal with the nutritional requirements of the crop through the growing season, and also we need adequate amounts of sunlight and rainfall to help us get to that goal as well, really. Yeah, okay. So just a bit of background to the farm. We are really we nutrient map the whole farm. Yeah. We are keen on trying to keep the nutrition right, trying to keep the pH right. I mean, for me, pH is critical. It's hugely important.
You can do what the hell you like with nutrition, but if the pH is wrong and it can't get hold of it, well, you might as well not bother. So the pH, I haven't actually looked up the results because I haven't had time, but I'll almost guarantee the pH will be right. Yeah. We've used a lot of Fibrofos in the past. Okay, so I don't think the phosphorus levels will be too bad. But what I would say is that, and what you always tell me with Fibrofos is, it's not always the most readily available. So we have actually moved away from that in recent times, and we're starting to use sewage sludge a bit more, which I think I actually rate quite highly. And yes, you've now talked about what you do to set the crop up for a really good start, which is, I suppose, what we aim to do across the farm. What I can tell you is we got to the end of October with all that plan having gone completely out of the window. Everywhere was absolutely sodden wet.
Yeah.
James went on holiday, and we were sort of hell bent on trying to turn it round while he was away. So whilst all these good plans were set, what happened in practice was it was absolutely sodden wet through, and we got to drill in come hell or high water. And actually, it's not perfect. But and we videoed it to death. Everybody knows what the hell we were going through, as was every other farm in the country. Not a bad stand, but whether you'd predict it does 12 tonne at the moment, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think we've got, like, given the challenge you've been given, at least we've got something. We can work with it, and we can also learn from what we do treating this crop to get to this point as well. So, okay, we've got this aspiration of 12, and then in the car I heard 14 being mentioned.
If James had been here, it'd have been more than that.
So I think what we'll do, and what hopefully we'll have fairly shortly is a full analysis of all the elements in the soil.
Yeah.
So basically we call this a broad spectrum soil test, but ultimately this broad spectrum soil test will tell us all the available nutrients, either in the macronutrients and micronutrients in the soil. It will help us interpret whether any of those are limiting, or whether we've got an abundance of certain elements which maybe restrict the availability of certain key nutrients that we need for the crop to grow, and utilise maybe other products we might apply through the growing season. The other things we'll do is once we start to get to a crop stage where we can measure nutrients in the leaf, we'll start tissue testing and understanding whether we're getting that food from the soil. So are those nutrients coming and showing in the plant, or do we need to address this through micronutrients or foliar fertilisers through the growing season that we've got?
Yeah.
So you were saying you've put some nitrogen on here already.
Yeah, this has had just over 100 kilos of nitrogen already.
Okay.
That had that the other day, so it's probably not actually got hold of it yet. Which is some of the farm has had it a bit longer, and the colour is lovely.
Yeah.
It's just changed all of a sudden. This has only really just had it. So it's got 100 kilos of nitrogen underneath it at the moment.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, soil temperatures are still quite cold at the moment, although this winter we've had a really open winter, so we've had lots of mineralisation in the soil where the bugs and bacteria are naturally freeing up nitrogen, making it available, and actually crops, like you said, this crop was drilled relatively late.
Yeah.
It's actually picked up that free nitrogen and has shown itself in the canopy. I would say that 100 kilos of nitrogen definitely isn't showing itself yet, and also given where we are in terms of the time of the month, we're a little way off seeing that. But if the nitrogen's there, we've got a large amount of nitrogen there in essence, really, Michael, for it to take hold of. The other important element that we can't forget here in the whole process is sulphur, and I presume that's had some sulphur applied with it, is it?
Yes, it's had sulphur as well. What we tend to do is we only use one grade of nitrogen sulphur fertiliser. It's all liquid.
Yeah.
So it gets sort of, well, I wouldn't say drip fed, because actually we only go twice. So we're not going 3 times, partly because we want to get it on. We tend to have these droughty springs, don't we?
Yeah.
We try to get nitrogen on a little bit earlier than probably some people would. So we're only going to go twice rather than 3 times or even 4.
Okay.
But it'll get sulphur both times.
Yeah,
so,
brilliant. So we need sulphur to help nitrogen conversions in the plant. So we can't just apply as much nitrogen as physically possible and expect it to do the job, because actually we need sulphur to help the plant build proteins, which is ultimately transforming nitrogen in the plant. So it's good you're getting some sulphur in with that nitrogen that you're putting on. I think what we need to do is we need to keep monitoring the crop. We also need to get an understanding of how much residual nitrogen is in the soil already here.
Yeah.
So I don't think you've probably taken a soil mineral nitrogen on this field, but we'll probably have some reference amounts of soil mineral nitrogen. We can use book values, standard tables to determine how much nitrogen is in the soil, but then we can start to build the overall end plan based around how much N's in the soil, what the start of the season captured nitrogen was.
Yeah.
Probably had about 15 kilos of nitrogen in the crop before you put that 100 kilos of nitrogen on. And then we can then start looking at the building blocks of nitrogen through the season for that second application.
Yeah.
You mentioned it's Skyfall, so you're hoping to achieve 13% protein as well.
We are.
Yeah.
No pressure, Tom.
So on top of the 12 tons, we've got another 40 kilos of nitrogen to maybe try and help push that protein development within the plant as well.
Yeah.
So I think with that timing of nitrogen, we'll be thinking maybe later in the season anyway, in terms of determining, whether it is 40 kilos or whether we need to apply more nitrogen for yield at growth stage 37, 39, or even later. But we can hopefully chat as we go through the season and talk about what we need to do when we get to that point. But I think the early application of nitrogen, we know with the weather conditions we always get these springs is we get an extremely dry period and an extremely wet period.
Yeah.
And half the challenge for any farmer is getting that fertiliser into the soil so it's there and available for the plant to take it up. But the challenge comes is when it turns extremely dry, is that fertiliser can't actually work in the soil. The bugs in the soil as well also don't make that nitrogen as available, and plants tend to not take that nitrogen up because it needs to be in solution, i.e. in the soil moisture phases in the soil. So I think a lot of growers these days are going out slightly earlier with nitrogen, so there's nitrogen there sitting there readily available for the crop when it needs it. The liquid fertiliser you would have applied, a lot of it is in the ammonium form, so it's quite stable, sits in the soil, binds to clay colloids, so it tends to stick in the soil, and then as soil temperatures warm up, it converts into nitrate and the plant starts to take it up in more readily available amounts. The other things we need to think about is putting large doses of nitrogen on is really good, but we need to be mindful that weather conditions as well, prevailing weather conditions, I unfortunately I can't predict the weather. So are we going to get
I thought you could influence it, Tom.
I might predict the lottery. If I'd have done that, I'd have predicted the lottery numbers and we'd have been in business. But I think we've also got to plan ahead in terms of what the weather might bring. So there are things in the toolkit. So you can use products that help to keep the nitrogen stable in the soil. So we use
so
a
now
product.
You're talking about inhibitors.
Yeah, so there are, there's a whole new world of inhibitors. A lot of inhibitors are used to stop nitrogen gassing off.
Yeah.
Nitrogen gets converted by bugs and enzymes in the soil, and that nitrogen is lost in the form of ammonia into the atmosphere. And what inhibitors do is they stop that ammonia dissipating off into the atmosphere. That tends to occur mostly when soils are very, very warm, or they're starting to warm up, and air temperatures are warming up. So you wouldn't see volatilization at this time of year with this application. But the other thing what inhibitors can do is they can help hold the nitrogen in a form that stays stable. So if there was an extremely wet period, it would stop that nitrogen being leached down through the rooting zone. So we use products like Liquid to keep that nitrogen in the rooting zone, stopping it moving down through the soil that the plant can't access while its roots are small.
So, as you know, we've done this 100 kilos already. I actually didn't use Liquid with the first dose because I felt, it's still plenty cool enough. We were early. I'm not too worried. We weren't putting the whole lot on in one go. When we go second time, I will put Liquid in with the nitrogen because our second dose is likely to be fairly early. Yeah. Because, as I say, we try to go. Several reasons. Partly we try to go before it dries up. And
it's workload as well, I can imagine, isn't it? Yeah.
Workload's pretty important.
Yeah,
As you know, James has now, in his wisdom, decided to swap four sprays in for two.
Right, okay, and put liquid and everything else through it.
So liquid fertiliser and Michael will work it, don't worry. So there is a bit of workload involved. There is a bit of the nitrogen has to go on when we've got time. Yeah. I'm not saying that we do try and get everything on. Timing for me is critical. Whether you're talking about ag chem, whether you're talking about nitrogen. So we do try to make sure we get it. And we, in the past, if necessary, Agrii have got a contracting business in Lincolnshire, as you know, and we will drag a sprayer in, but that's going to get more difficult because there isn't many people that have got 48 metre sprayers.
Yeah, you are a bit limited there.
So you know, we do have to think about that. So liquid safe, yeah, we will put it in the tank to make sure that what we put on the field is actually used and we don't lose it either into the atmosphere or into the or leaching if we get a wet spring. Yeah. Just touch on it's actually not legislation, is it? It's stewardship. Just to touch on our obligations now with inhibitors.
If you're applying liquid fertiliser, so liquid fertiliser contains a proportion of ureic nitrogen. So if you apply liquid nitrogen post the 31st of March, you should be using a urease inhibitor. Okay. So I know you were talking about going early, so whether that second dose is post the 31st of March.
Some of it might be,
yeah.
But we'll be in and around the end of March, early April anyway.
Yeah. So rather than getting an outright ban on urea-based fertilisers, and like I said, liquid fertiliser contains a proportion of urea in it, industry opted for a stewardship-based approach where certain times of the year you don't need to use an inhibitor, i.e. when the risk of nitrogen loss into the atmosphere is less, so this time of year, but then post the 31st of March where the risk is higher, you use a urease inhibitor to basically stop that nitrogen gassing off into the atmosphere, keeping it in the soil so the plant can access it and get more out of the nitrogen as well, because actually they do bring a real benefit in terms of nitrogen use efficiency, i.e. in terms of getting more nitrogen out of that product that you're putting on. So I can see why you want to put it into the tank mix, you know, post the 31st of March. Yeah.
Okay. Now, interestingly, we're talking about pushing the yield on this crop. We've been stood here for 10 minutes. Not once have we mentioned agrochemicals, and I think that's actually worth mentioning because when James and I were stood here, we were going to, no expense spared, throw everything at it, lash it here, lash it there.
There is a couple of things there, Michael. You are right.
Yeah. But my point is, actually, we're not really talking about upping the rates of any ag-chem, any nasty fungicides, nasty pesticides. You know, actually, this is Skyfall. It's quite a dirty variety. We're fairly robust with fungicides anyway. We're not going to be spending a shed load more on agrochemicals. Really, what we're looking at is nutrition and plant health here. And yes, we will be applying probably a few extra trace elements, but they're still nutrition, and we're looking at biological products to maintain plant health. And actually, in the last few days, I have put a product called Inoculate on this, which is basically it's an amino acid based product, but it's chains of amino acids called peptides. Now, I'm going to go steady on how I explain this because I'm not all that good at explaining these things, but these peptides are targeted amino acids, and they're targeted at the job in hand. So what we're trying to do is apply that to the crop early to enhance the plant's health and stimulate its resistance to disease. So it's not a fungicide. We're increasing the plant's health to a bit like inoculation, if you like. So
like a prebiotic.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And within that there is some foliar uptake, nitrogen, sulfur, manganese and magnesium, and zinc. Zinc's quite an interesting. Just talk me through the science of the trace. Well, actually, not just zinc. The trace elements at this time of year, the key trace elements.
Yeah, going back to your previous comment around we're not going to throw no end of pesticides at this crop. We are going to put lots of nitrogen on here, by the sounds of things, and that will grow lots of green matter. Yeah. The challenge with that becomes is we can sometimes then encourage disease by putting more nitrogen on. We kind of solve one problem and then another problem arises because we create a massive population of plant matter that then encourages disease to spread all around because we've got all this plant matter there, and also it's got this big demand for nutrients and everything else. So it is really important that while we're going along this journey is that we use other elements to keep the crop green. So you talked about using amino acids in terms of improving the plant's health as it starts to go through these rapid periods of growth, and also looking at other elements. They also play different roles in terms of helping the plant grow naturally anyway. So you talked about zinc. We need to make sure we've got zinc available in the soil, or there's elements not limiting the availability of zinc. So to give you an example, when we look at the soil test, and you mentioned you've used quite a lot of fibrofos in the past.
Yeah.
If you've used something with quite a lot of P in it, it might be that this field has got lots of P in it, and that P potentially might limit the availability of zinc.
Yeah.
And then that plant can access the zinc. The zinc is really important for plant transformations where it's building roots, and also responsible for things like, hormone changes in the plant in terms of accessing zinc as well. So zinc is really important. It's not needed in massive amounts, so we can address it as a foliar application. Sometimes you may address it as a seed dressing or something like that, but we can identify on the soil test whether that's going to be a big limiting factor through the start of the season. I mean, going back to me saying, well, if we'd had a bit of a longer run up, I might have even done a zinc test on the grain to understand how much residual zinc was actually in the seed that we put in the soil, because actually that helps with that early development of that young seedling root, and that also helps to influence how quickly it's going to maybe grow and develop. So zinc is really important, and it's probably at this growth stage, as we approach growth stage 30, we're wanting to understand whether that potentially has a limiting factor there, really.
And of course, if you wind the clock back, we didn't have this opportunity. But what we could have done, had we thought that zinc would have been a good idea, or indeed manganese, we could have actually put that on the seed.
Yeah.
So there are all sorts of things we can do to help us along this road.
It's great, isn't it? I've started making excuses before we've even got to harvest.
No, I think we have to be realistic. I don't think it's excuses, and I know I'm going to get a lot of stick from James because we are. You're right. We are still here making excuses. I don't think that's the case at all. We just have to be realistic, and you have to be aware of the crop right from the before it's even put in the ground. Which. When we have the benefit of being able to plan, which we didn't this autumn, we think about all these things on farm anyway. Right. The other thing I've done, which I'm a real great fan of, is I've put a product called Release on here just recently. Now, I would usually do Release at drilling. Release. Can you just explain what Release is? Yeah. So basically, we have a lot of free phosphorus in our soils already. So our soils contains loads and loads and loads of phosphorus in essence. We measure phosphorus using something called an index system. So we measure water-soluble P in the soil, and we identify that basically on an index test, or how many parts per million of P is in the soil. So we then use that to base our recommendations to farmers, etc. But what we're noticing is actually we can exploit more P from the soil, and that can be done through organic processes by adding organic manures, adding more biology to the soil, more roots. But what Release is Release contains a family of ingredients which basically help or mimic what plant roots do. So plant roots will exude acids into the soil to unlock unavailable forms of P naturally anyway. That's exactly what Release does. So Release, you apply it to the soil, and it starts to neutralise phosphorus that is bound to elements that lock it up. So for example, phosphorus binds to calcium quite easily, basically forming a solid form that the plant can't suck up and take up. So what Release does is it works to basically keep them apart from each other. So keep the calcium and the phosphorus in equilibrium, so the P is there for the plant to take up. We initially trialled this, we've been working with it for donkey's years now, as a coating on fertilisers, because we knew if we coated the fertiliser with something to keep the P soluble for longer, we could reduce the amount of fertiliser we were applying. But in trials, we were starting to see that the active ingredient was actually working in the absence of phosphorus. And then we started to notice that actually it was influencing the phosphorus in the soil. So
applying the release, what it does is it gives you a free amount of P for the plant to access, utilise, build a root system and take off and grow, really. So the release won't free up all the P in the soil, because there's so much P there that you'd never do that, and you'd never want to do that. But what it will do is it will give the crop a window of opportunity to access P that might not necessarily have been there, build a root system, particularly on a late drill cereal. That's really where it starts to come into its own, because legally we haven't got a justification to say there's a legitimate argument to say, well, let's chuck some nitrogen on to see if we can green it up before Christmas.
No.
And actually that nitrogen is not going to be that efficient anyway. Whereas if you can increase the phosphorus availability while the plant is needing to build a root system early, then that's where release really comes into its own.
Yeah. So actually my strategy, I've used release on this farm for several years now. My strategy is to stick it in with the Roundup, glyphosate I should say, pre-drilling, and then the drill works it in a little bit. It doesn't get turned right in, but it just tickles it into the seed level or round and about. This year it was so blooming awful, and I was, the potential at the time was terrible. We were all feeling very sorry for ourselves. I actually didn't put it in at that timing because I didn't want to spend the money.
No.
I just couldn't justify it. But having said that, on previous years, I'm absolutely convinced, and this is my heartfelt, non-scientific whatever, that it's made a dramatic difference on crop establishment on this farm. Now you've done all the trials work. I've seen the results. I know it works. I haven't actually done strip trials or anything on this farm. We haven't got the capacity to do it with the sprayers. But I'm absolutely convinced it's made a big difference on establishment.
I think what it does in terms of sort of improving the general health of the crop is because if you take calcium, for example, in the soil. Now these soils will contain a reasonably high amount of calcium, and hopefully when we look at the soil test that will maybe back up my comment here. And when you have a dominant cation like calcium in the soil, it will also restrict the availability of other elements, particularly things we naturally apply anyway, like manganese, for example. And because the release is helping to keep that equilibrium of calcium in the soil with things like phosphorus, what it does, as well as a slight benefit, is it also helps to increase the availability of certain metals that the plant likes. So take manganese, for example. It will also naturally increase the availability of manganese in the soil, which in turn means you get a relatively nice green healthy plant, because the roots going, I can find some manganese, this is good, I can use this. And ultimately if you've got that, you're then on the steps to helping with photosynthesis and things like that as well. So we are finding a lot of growers are using release as part of their strategy. We treated somewhere like 42,000 hectares of land with release last season.
I'm not surprised.
I think growers are seeing it as part of the strategy. So phosphate use in the UK is declining, whether that's due to economic reasons or whether it's due to environmental reasons, because we don't want to over apply phosphate, because phosphate in watercourses isn't great, so we want to apply the optimum amount to make sure crops can utilise it. But what release does is it means growers can maybe reduce the amount of P they're applying, or take advantage of the P that's in their soils anyway, so they don't need to maybe utilise all that bagged phosphate that they want to be purchasing, really.
Right, so that's brought us up to date. Going forward, I will. I'm going to take a soil sample of this field, or several probably, and then as we get into the season, I'll do some tissue testing. But would you be kind enough to come back and assess it again and have another chat? In month, 6 weeks time, and see where we are mid-season.
No, definitely. I think what would be really good is if we can do the broad spectrum. Ideally, it'd be really nice to do a Solvita, because it's a really nice layout in terms of everything. The other thing we can then start to talk about is the interaction between all the different elements and what we need in terms of maybe your thinking in terms of what you might do in terms of foliar nutrition through the growing season. So we can then look at that, and then hopefully as we get past growth stage 31, we could then maybe start looking at NDVI imagery. We could also come out here with the end tester and just see how much chlorophyll is in the leaf across the field. It's all quite even
Yeah.
You know, as we look at it now, and once it picks up that nitrogen, we'll be
Yeah.
really starting to show N in the plant, and then we can start to model.
Yeah.
Well, this is our aspirational amount of nitrogen. How much do we need? You know, just a bit of fine tuning and balancing, Michael. Really, yeah.
I think none of this is particularly new science on this farm. You know, you and I have been working together for a while, and I don't think that any of it's particularly what we're not doing already. But what I want to do is demonstrate how much thought goes into the science of growing a crop of wheat as we go through the season. And whether we hit 12 tonnes or not in this field of nightmares, you know, what will be interesting is that we've got this opportunity to demonstrate what we're doing right the way through the season, and the fact that it's not really chucking a lot of pesticides about.
No, this is you need nutrition.
Yeah.
To get this crop to do what it needs to do, and the plant gets its food from the soil.
Yeah.
So we've got to feed the soil and make sure the soil can actually supply those nutrients. So you know, it's not a case of saying, right, we'll just layer up as much stuff over this field with the sprayer as possible.
Let's not forget though that I do have to, you know, we're doing all this with nutrition. What we do need to do is make sure that our solar panels, the leaves,
exactly,
remain clean. We don't scorch them with fertiliser. We keep the disease off them. They remain nice and green and clean. They're sucking the sunlight in, so they can actually use that nutrition, and which is sort of my job. And I'm pleased you used the word solar panel, because that is what we ultimately will need. Literally is what it is.
Yeah.
And when it comes to soaking sunlight in, you need that solar panel. The other vital ingredient is the sunlight itself.
Yeah.
And last year, I heard a stat the other day that we had the least amount of solar energy in the last 10 years or so, which I think is why we weren't seeing brilliant yields. You know, it wasn't a fantastic yielding year across the country, and I think that's, you know, there is only so much we can do. We do need that sun.
It's a really good point, Michael. And we monitor solar radiation, and we use Met Office data, and we do take retrospective look back at crop yields and go, well, why? Last year was protein, wasn't it? Last year was like, well, why didn't that plant transform all that nitrogen into protein? And you're right, it was just that lack of sunlight, and that plant just didn't photosynthesize as much and didn't transport as much of that nitrogen into the grain as, you know, because everybody was chasing that milling premium, weren't they? And unfortunately, you know, Mother Nature was impeding some of that. So
Bless her. I spent the last 20 minutes talking non-stop, or we have. I haven't been rude about James once. So
okay.
So we'll move on and let you get on. But thank you very much indeed for coming.
Thank you, Michael. Nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Oh God, I've just found a bit of blackgrass here. I'll pull
look at that, eyes like a hawk.
And thank you very much. And we'll go and get on with our day. Let you get on with yours, and I'll go and give James some abuse. Right. Well, that's it for another week. We've had quite a good week, really. We've finished the peas, so they're all drilled up. They're now by 5 o'clock tonight. They'll be sprayed up, so we can forget about those. Apart from the pigeon control. Don't you just love peas? The mustard drilling we will hopefully have finished by the end of the weekend, and that's tied up behind that with the spraying. Whilst everybody else is flat out, I've come across James's car keys in the office, which is great news. Got something to play about with for the weekend. Till next week.